in this episode, we are going to cover your exact running warm-up if you're currently running with knee pain. So this is our third part in our three-part series of knee pain when running. And as I said today, we're going to talk all about the warm-up. So this warm-up is going to get the right muscles lengthened and shortened. This warm-up is also going to help to prepare your right muscles for the gait pattern. And this warm-up is also going to get your heart rate up and get you ready to go for your run. I would be lying if I said that I warm up every single time before I go for a run. However, I would recommend it. I do think it makes your runs feel a lot better, but at a bare minimum, I would recommend putting these 3 exercises into your strength training routine, your exercise routine throughout the week, so that you're prepping the right muscles for the gait pattern. You see, the 3 problems that I see with most people's warm-ups out there is that number 1, they are unfunctional. So things like leg swings, for example, aren't very functional, might feel good, but they're not really doing much for you. Things like static stretches, quad stretch, nothing wrong with that. It feels good, yes, but if you're solely doing stretches in your warm-up, that is not enough to get you prepped for running. And lastly, most importantly, people out training the running pattern with their warm-up. So I'm going to chat a little bit more about that later on, but we're maybe talking things like calf raises, heel walks, these things that actually aren't functional to the gait pattern and therefore are actually out training the skills that you need for gait. The 3 things that I'd recommend that you have in your running warm-up is number 1, exercises that strengthen the stance pattern of gait. So getting into that running stance, strengthening yourself there, feeling every movement there. Number 2, moving your joints through the full ranges of movement of gait, if not even a little bit more, going into the exact movement patterns that your hip will be going into, your knee will be going into, and that your foot and ankle will be going into. And number 3, involving plyometrics in your warm-up. Plyometrics are the best group of exercises which are going to prepare you for the load demands of running, so absorbing force, producing force. However, there's one very important thing within plyometrics that we're going to cover later that a lot of people miss. So when picking my 3 favorite exercises for this warm-up, I made sure to pick 3 that can be sort of branched out a little bit more as well. So you can add your own touch to these if there's certain areas you want to lengthen more, certain things you want to work on a little bit more within these sort of 3 skills. That's how I would view these exercises. They're more skills, they're more the base, they're more the foundation, and then you can build on top of that. These 3 exercises are really well rounded. They're going to make sure they're targeting, as I said, all the right areas. They're going to make sure they're lengthening and shortening the right muscles. And most importantly, they're going to make sure that they are preparing you for the activity, which is running, that you're just about to do, and making sure your knee is in the best possible place for that run. I have tried to make these easy to do in the likes of a car park or outside, because I appreciate that you won't always just be running straight from home. You're not going to have a mat and a foam roller at all times to get yourself all warmed up and ready. You might be leaving work and going for a run, and you need something that you can implement quite quickly in any environment. So these are all done in standing. None of them will make you look really, really crazy. None of them involve you being on the ground. And yeah, hopefully they should all be easy to implement into your routine. So we will get started. So the first exercise is what I like to call a running stance hold. So what we're basically going to look at here is the stance involved with running. It sounds like a really easy exercise. It looks like a really easy exercise, but once you actually feel this, once you take on board the cues I'm going to teach you in this video, you will then be able to do that every single time you're doing it, and you're going to get a lot more out of the exercise. So you're going to start with one leg forward. I would recommend you do this with your running shoes on. Maybe for the first time, you could pop them off so you can really feel the foot, but obviously whenever you're warming up for a run, it's much easier if you've got your running shoes on and that you can replicate the same sort of movements and the same control that you would do if you were in bare feet. So it's really good to get used to your running shoes. So you're going to pop a little bend in your knee to begin with, and that's a really key component with this exercise, is that you get a nice positive shin angle, that your shin goes from neutral to positive. It's not staying back here. You haven't got all your weight in your heel. You've let that knee come forward. So that's a really important thing you want to do throughout the whole exercise, is keep your knee in that position. Your back leg is going to be really, really light. So I've got like literally about 5% of my weight in that leg. Most of my weight is on this front leg, and that's really important. If you're hanging back weight in this leg, it's going to throw off your positive shin angle. It's going to put you under your heel, and to be quite honest, it's not going to do anything for the muscles in the working leg. So get that body weight forward, get this back leg really, really light, and get that positive shin angle back in place. The shin angle is probably the biggest thing you'll need to keep checking in on as the exercise progresses. You're going to want to pull it back. You have to teach yourself to let that stay forward at all times. Now that you're in this position, then the next thing that I want to look at is making sure that your bum isn't sticking out behind you. So a lot of the time you will be left in this position. This isn't very functional to running. When we run, our hips come forward as we take into our next step. So it's really important that we replicate that now, because this is the phase of gait that we're trying to replicate, is whenever we're going from hip flexion to hip extension. So just draw that hip forward. Imagine there's a string at the front of the hip. Bring it forward. Just check in that you still got your positive shin angle, and check in that you're still light on the back foot. And then one more thing to look at here is your hip bones. So make sure that your hip bones aren't facing into the opposite corner of the room. Make sure those hip bones are forward. What that looks like from the front, if my hip bones are facing this way, you would see this knee flare out to the side. If my hip bones are facing the camera, all of a sudden I'm in more of an internally rotated position, which is exactly what we want. So positive shin angle, back foot nice and light, hip forward, pelvis facing forward or hip bones facing straight forward. And then the last thing I want you to do here is think about your toes being really, really long. So you might be standing in this position feeling a little bit wobbly. If that is the case, I'd recommend holding on to something super lightly just to get a feel for the movement first of all, and then test yourself by taking your hands, say, off a wall. But I want you to really work on your toes being really long. Right now you might be clenching your toes and trying to squeeze them into the ground to keep you really stable. I want you to think about having long toes the whole time, like a splat foot, as wide as possible, getting full length into those toes. And what that will enable you to do is find your midfoot, which is a really nice sweet spot of our foot that we want to be able to produce force off when we run and absorb force whenever we land as well. So that's the part that we're trying to get. It's just behind the ball of the big toe, and you're thinking about pressing that into the ground and keeping those toes as long as possible. And the only extra little tiny thing that you could add in here, and I mean very, very, very tiny, is a little credit card space under your heel. When you're wearing running shoes, it might not feel like much at all because you've obviously got a thicker sole. If you're in your bare feet, you'll notice that tiny little lift coming underneath the heel. I don't want this to look like this, where you throw onto your tiptoes and your knee flings forward. That's not what we're looking for at all, because my chest is dropped, my hip is dropped, it's completely thrown off the whole pattern. We're looking for that nice tall position, hip forward, back foot light, positive shin angle, hips forward, tiny little lift underneath the heel, which is causing me to really force pressure down into my midfoot. And as I'm holding here, I can feel my calf, my soleus, my Achilles, right up into my hamstring, even into my glute. Holding here, embracing that burn, and you're going to hold that for 30 seconds to begin with. And as you build through the sets of exercises, I would recommend you do that about 3 times and aim to get up to about 45 seconds on that final hold. This is going to feel burny, it's going to feel a bit boring as well, but you want to just really concentrate on what is my foot doing. This is all about having good foot intent, which is absolutely key in running as we press that ground behind us, is that we can push in with that midfoot. We can get all those stability muscles fired up. You're going to particularly feel your lower leg. If you've had an old ankle injury, you're going to feel this like mad. You're going to find this is really, really burny and crampy. It's all about breathing, all about keeping your chest tall. Make sure you don't sort of slump into this and let your bum come out. Think about the running pattern. Think about how you want to look when you're running. This is what you're trying to replicate. So as the first exercise in your warm-up, that is going to get the posterior chain fired up like mad. It's going to get a bit of ankle range happening. It's going to help you get into hip flexion, particularly if you've been sitting all day long. And then the second exercise is a little bit more dynamic. So this exercise is going to be a hinge to triple extension. You can do this by a wall, you can do this on your car. I'm going to do this by this post, so you could even use a lamp post or something, anything that you have. If you're really struggling, there's literally nothing to hold on to, you could test your balance a little bit and do a slightly adapted version where you're not holding on to anything. So I'll show you that at the end. This exercise is going to challenge you from a more dynamic pattern point of view. It's still going to encompass the key skills that we were just working on through our stance hold, but what we're going to really look at here is getting you through those fuller ranges of movement. So you're going to hold on to the wall or the post or whatever you've got, and you're going to put a little bend in your front knee, just like we talked about before. Positive shin angle, hip forward, nice and tall, back foot light, midfoot pressure. Get into that exact same position. This is a really key position. We want to keep learning and keep understanding. So you're going to get here to begin with. This is your start position. Then from here, all we're going to look at doing is reaching our back leg out behind us. As a result, our front hip is going to go into a hinge. So we're looking at sticking our bum out behind us into a hinge pattern. Don't worry too much if you lift your leg up high, but I would really recommend and most of this movement coming from the hip itself. And essentially you're going to go into that full hinge position. I'm not completely relying on the pole, I'm not leaning on it heavily. It's just there mainly for a bit of balance. And then what we're going to work on here is pressing through that midfoot and then coming right up into full hip extension, nice little bend at the knee, and then a nice bit of toe extension as we come up into a nice high knee at the front leg, as if we're running on and taking our next stride. We're dramatizing the movements of gait a little bit here for good reason. We're trying to get into fuller ranges of movement. So we're going from hip flexion to hip extension, just like we do when we run. And we're going from our heel to our midfoot onto our tiptoe, just like we do when we run. What I would recommend with this exercise is that we stay around that midfoot area for most of the time. So a really nice thing to add into this exercise once you get the hang of it is that little heel hover. So from the very start position, you're thinking, right, I've got a little credit card underneath my heel. I'm going to keep it there. Going to keep everything else the same, keeping that credit card space, keeping that credit card space, keeping that credit card space. I haven't changed that heel at all. It's staying in the same place. I'm currently feeling my hamstring and my hip. and then I'm pressing that midfoot into the ground. I'm keeping that credit card space, and then I'm opening that space even more as I come right up onto my tiptoe. As I come back again, my knee comes into a positive shin angle, my credit card space comes lower again. I'm pushing my bum back, using that hip to drive up towards the wall again, and then reaching back into the hinge and then back up again. So it's a nice exercise getting that posterior chain fired up. There are lots of wee technique bits we can work on to make it like an absolutely perfect exercise. If you are doing it in your strength training, you can make sure that you have your chin tucked, all these sorts of things. However, whenever you're warming up for a run, it's just a nice quick fire exercise to get your muscles through their full range of movement and ready to go. If you haven't got anything to hold on to, what I'd recommend doing here is coming into your hinge position. Similar idea, you can still have the credit card space under the heel, take it a little bit slower, and then try to come up onto that big tiptoe. You might just find that you're struggling a little bit with your balance there, and that's why I would recommend having that something to hold on to. So our third and final exercise then is going to be our plyometrics. And like I said, when people do plyometrics, they sometimes do these wacky exercises, which to be quite honest, I wouldn't even qualify as a plyometric. And the reason for that is for a plyometric to be functional to running, we want us to have a ground contact time of less than 0.25 seconds. Now that is quick. That is literally foot on the ground, foot back off the ground, floor is lava sort of stuff, really, really quick. However, it may not always be that quick from the get-go, but you want to at least try to make that your goal. So if you're doing sinky plyometrics, yielding plyometrics, as much as they are helpful for so many other things, and I use them all the time, they're not a true plyometric when it comes to running, especially in our warm-up. We want to work on those ground contact times being short, snappy, having nice stiffness through our joints when we run, being stiff and springy like a pogo stick. And that's what I want you to think of at all times when you're doing your plyometrics. We want a nice soft bend around our knee, yes, but whenever we're doing a hop, for example, we don't want that hop to be really sinky and sloppy, okay? That's really per energy efficiency. We want a nice stiff knee, but in a bend. Nice stiff, soft knee, a bit like a pogo stick, stiff and springy. That's what we're aiming for. So with our plyometrics, I like to talk about having 3 intensities and building up through those intensities, especially if you have had a day, maybe you're at the desk, you're more sedentary, and then all of a sudden you're going for a run. It's a really nice way to build yourself up to that maximal intensity, depending on what type of run you're doing. If it's more of a zone 2 run, you might just stick around the lower intensity. If you're aiming for more of a tempo run, you're trying to pick up that pace, you definitely want to work at this higher intensity. So that's what I meant whenever I said at the start, this warm-up can have a bit more freedom in it, and you can layer in whatever is more suitable to you and the style of running that you're about to do. So the plyometric that I would recommend is a hop. Really simple, doesn't need much space. You can do it on the spot. You can do it a few feet in front of you and coming back again. And as I said, I'd work through 3 different intensities. So just sort of think about it in thirds. Think about that top third being really getting towards that 70 to 100% sprint. And then the lower 2 thirds are lighter and lighter. Make sure that your lower intensity one is low enough that you have enough scope to climb up. I see a lot of people doing plyometrics and they go all out with that first plyometric really heavy into the ground. And then whenever they try to climb through those levels, they haven't got anywhere to go because they already started so high. So start super light with your first plyometric, and don't worry if it feels a bit sinky at first. You're just getting a feel for the ground. You can switch between legs. You're trying to find that sweet spot of the foot, and you're trying to hit that spot every single time. So whenever I'm doing my hop, I'm thinking about that single leg stand position from the start, the positive shin angle, the midfoot pressure, the soft knee, the hip forward, and I'm trying to maintain that the whole time. I'm not losing it into releasing up. I'm not on my tiptoes. I'm not on my heel with my knee straight. I'm trying to embody all of those key skills and then just repeat them at a high volume and a high repetition. So that would be me at a lower level. And then as I go through the higher levels, you can work on maybe trying to get a bit more height. So think about being even higher and springier. And then once you get to that highest level, really think about picking up your foot and trying to get even more height even out of the leg. And then what you can even add into that is a little bit of distance. So you can hop forward, hop backwards, and just get a feel for the ground that you're about to run on and get a feel for your running shoes as well. So that's it. Those are my 3 exercises that I would recommend that you involve in your running warm-up, or you even involve in your strength training. And as I said, you can layer in lots of different skills on top of that, layer in a few stretches in and around that, and you'll be ready and set up to start your run.